this video is a little different, hence why it's not falling into any playlist. I'm going to take someone that in general I agree with and use snippets of their video to springboard into a larger discussion on the subject matter. Now, I'm a big fan of the Nostalgia Critic. I think Doug Walker does a great job on bad movie reviews, and sometimes he does videos on related subjects of import to the movie industry. This is one such where he talks about whitewashing in Hollywood. I'll link to his video in the description, and I recommend you go watch it in its entirety. Where I agree in general terms with his conclusions, I had more to say on the subject, so let's get started.
Let's talk about whitewashing. Stop! Obviously, this is a subject everybody has a strong opinion on, especially given the news recently. Two big movies have just done previews, a trailer from Marvel's Doctor Strange and a still from Paramount's remake of Ghost in the Shell. The internet flipped, as both films were accused of whitewashing, which, for those who don't know, is when a person who's supposed to be of a certain ethnicity is suddenly played by a white person.
Which is really where the problem starts to arise. Who says that any particular role is supposed to be played by any particular ethnicity? Isn't that up to the owner and/or creator of the property? Now, in these two cases, they're translating comic books and animation to live action, and as with any adaptation, there are going to be changes. Take the X-Men movies. In the comic books, Wolverine is 5'3" tall. However, the actor who plays Wolverine in the movies, Hugh Jackman, is 6'2" tall. He's far too tall to play a comic-accurate Wolverine. Is this a case of height-washing? Of course not. He's just the best actor they could find to play the role, and therefore, the height of the character had to be changed. Were people up in arms at this? Did they scream that he was taking away a role from a short actor? Well, of course not. That would be stupid. But so too is all the whining about whitewashing.
In Ghost in the Shell's case, people were upset because Scarlett Johansson was playing what was originally an Asian character, and in Doctor Strange's case, a Tibetan man is now being portrayed as a Celtic woman, played by Tilda Swinton. This is a touchy subject that's making a lot of people feel enraged. Whitewashing is an art that, let's face it, white people have mastered bullshitting for years. Which is all the more reason to get upset. People can't believe that it's still going on.
Except, I really don't think that it is. In fact, you can make the case that it never was, at least if you want to define whitewashing as the purposeful replacement of non-white characters with white actors and actresses specifically for racist reasons. Now, I've gone into the reasons why Scarlett Johansson isn't a whitewashed character in my video called Dear Stupid Feminist. In the original anime, not only is Motoko Kusanagi not the character's real name and she has no clue about her past, but she's in an artificial body that isn't even human. Ethnicity has no meaning whatsoever for her. It's like trying to assign ethnicity to your toaster. Doug also argues what I find to be a wholly convincing explanation for the changing of the character in Doctor Strange, because a big part of their foreign market is China, and frankly, China doesn't like Tibet very much. Therefore, they changed the character for financial purposes. Marvel stands to lose tens of millions of dollars if the Chinese refuse to go to see the movie.
I also keep hearing that there's no Asian American actors big enough to guarantee a good box office. Well, first of all, there's tons of Asian American actors, and many of them are very successful. But I know what they mean when they say none of them are as big as Scarlett Johansson. Sure, star power is important, but guess what? Some of the highest grossing movies and franchises don't have huge names as the main characters.
Yeah, but those are established titles that sell the movie. If they were making Star Wars today for the first time, Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill, and Carrie Fisher, three unknowns without big name star power, they'd never get cast. Star Wars was a relatively unknown, small budget movie for its time. Today, it's a multi-trillion-dollar property. It has a name that brings the crowds, not the actors. And the same can be said for all of Marvel's comic book movies. People come because it's the Avengers, or because it's Iron Man or Captain America. They don't come because of the actors. But Ghost in the Shell doesn't have that. It has a small dedicated group of anime fans in the West, but otherwise it's largely unknown. They need star power to get butts in seats. It's a financial decision, and Hollywood knows that it works. Like it or not, while there are many fine and talented Asian actors and actresses in America, none of them have the star power of Scarlett Johansson. They just don't. And that's not racist, that's reality. The studio has made a sound financial decision by casting a proven actress in the lead role on a property that is unproven in the American market.
On the one hand, it's good to know that the American filmmakers don't have any real anti-Tibetan agenda. I mean, they're a business and they want to make as much money as they can, but on the other hand, it's still ethically wrong. They're putting a prejudice ahead of not making more money.
No, sorry. They're not putting prejudice ahead of anything. It's not their prejudice. They're in business to make a profit. That is their sole reason for being in business. They are catering to their audience. They're making movies that people are going to go see. This really shouldn't be that hard to understand, except to those people who really don't comprehend how business actually functions. But that's the problem. Far too many people either don't know or don't care how businesses work. They think that businesses exist to make them feel good. No, businesses exist to sell products and make a profit to keep their shareholders happy. That's a fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of business in America, and that's a major problem.
In fact, something that's getting a lot of praise is when a role that's meant for a white actor is suddenly being played by a person of color. And I know what you might be saying. How is a person of color playing a white person's role any different from a white person playing a person of color's role? Stop! I'm not going where you think I'm going.
But you should be. Anyone who's going to curse white actors taking supposedly non-white roles, but cheer non-white actors that take supposedly white roles, is a hypocrite. There's no other way to look at it. But that's one of the problems with primarily the political left where these complaints come from. It's fine to quote-unquote discriminate against white actors and actresses, but discriminating against anybody non-white? Well, that's heresy. I got news for you people. You can't get rid of racism by practicing racism, just because it's against a group you choose to demonize. Whatever might have happened in the past, that's the past, and you can't change it by being discriminatory today. And remember what I said earlier about whitewashing maybe never being a thing? Well, it probably wasn't. It was just Hollywood catering to their audience of the day, knowing that some things just wouldn't sell to the American people of that time. That Americans were racist? Well, that wasn't Hollywood's fault. You can't change history by pretending it didn't happen, and you can't reverse past wrongs by committing more wrongs today. It just doesn't work that way.
I was actually shocked when they did Lord of the Rings and they didn't hire little people for the job.
Well, you shouldn't be. While there are plenty of great dwarf actors out there, studios are going to hire the best people they can get rather than people that meet some arbitrary physical characteristic. The aforementioned comic book Wolverine is, as I said before, 5'3" tall. Does that mean they should have hired, Joe Pesci to play him just because the actor's the same height? That makes no sense at all. And besides, the characters in Lord of the Ring, they're hobbits. Dwarf actors are not hobbits. You wouldn't want anybody to say you were biased against hobbit actors, would you? Let's not be specious.
Height-washing? Copyright. However, as much as those prejudices seem really worthy of anger, it's hard to tell where to draw the line. More transgender roles are opening up. Not all of them played by real transgenders, though many say they should be. Well, okay, I guess that seems legit, but there's also deaf roles out there. And shouldn't they be played by real deaf actors? Well, I guess that's a good point. Marlee Matlin won an Oscar and she's deaf. How about Jamie Foxx and Ray? In fact, most blind roles. Shouldn't they be played by real blind people? Yeah, how many blind actors are there? How about switching out Gary Sinise and Forrest Gump with a person who doesn't actually have legs? That seems like a very narrow field. Mr. Garrison on South Park is a gay man who had a sex change and turned lesbian. Shouldn't she be represented by an actor who is the exact same thing? On occasion, I think you just gotta act.
But that's the thing. These are actors. They're acting. They're not on screen to be themselves. They're there to play a role. And that role is not them. Isn't that the whole point of acting? To convincingly portray something that you're actually not? What's next? The only actors who can play characters with heart conditions actually have to have heart conditions themselves? And you might think that's funny, but this kind of ableism bullcrap comes up all the time. Where does it end? Actors and actresses can't color their hair, otherwise you're practicing hair color discrimination. Tell me you can't see that. Go ahead. Tell me.
By now you're probably figuring out that whitewashing, height-washing, gender-washing, whatever your load of clothes is, it's all kind of selective. I love a lot of these performances and actors, even if they're not technically what the character's supposed to be.
The characters don't exist. They're imaginary. They were made up. Who's to say what they're supposed to be other than the people who created them, or the people who own the copyright on them and who get to control what's done with them? People get so emotionally invested in these characters and what they want to see done with them that they forget their place. They are the observer. They're not the creator. Their control ends at whether or not they want to see the movie or watch the TV show. Yeah, they're welcome to get on the internet and bitch about anything they want to bitch about, but they need to recognize the limits of their personal control. They're welcome to their opinions, but nobody has to listen and nobody has to do what they say. If you spend all your time getting offended by movies and TV shows and video games, maybe you need to take a good hard look at your life. Something tells me you're doing something wrong.
There's pros and cons. We can see past race and gender and open our minds to a good performance, but we can also feel really uncomfortable when someone can't see what they're doing can be really harmful. Maybe it all comes down to intent, but even that seems kind of blurred.
Maybe people need to learn to laugh at themselves, especially over something like the picture of Peter Sellers playing Inspector Sidney Wang in the 1976 Neil Simon comedy Murder by Death. There's nothing offensive or harmful at all in that. It's a comedy. Some people do humor wrong.
The Wachowskis did a movie about reincarnation called Cloud Atlas, where every person plays every gender and ethnicity you can imagine. People are still on the fence about whether this is brilliant or amazingly uncomfortable. Or even coherent, but that's a different matter. It's made even more interesting, though, seeing how both directors have come out as transgender women.
But that has nothing at all to do with the quality of the film. Their gender identity has zero to do with their skill as directors. And let's be honest, most people think Cloud Atlas was crap.
The sad fact is, relations with anybody different is always going to be a complicated issue, even if we don't want it to be.
No, the sad fact is that people insist on thinking everyone is different and insisting on paying attention to skin color and gender and sexual orientation instead of just realizing that we're all fundamentally the same. We're all human and we ought to be treated like we're human. It isn't Hollywood that's dividing people. It's the political left who insists on pointing out all of these meaningless physical characteristics and demanding that they take center stage. The sooner they knock it the hell off, the sooner we all become colorblind and gender blind and sexual orientation blind and stop artificially dividing ourselves on the basis of entirely irrelevant and unimportant characteristics, the better off we'll all be.